What is up, my fellow Twelbians? I am Logan, the Totally Epic Gamer, and today we're going to be doing a full overview and breakdown of modding, crafting, and everything that it can enhance your guns and armor's abilities. So let's just start off with some general overviews, some tips. You generally can't start crafting and modding your gear until you get to this far in the storyline, which is Salvation, because you need to be able to talk to this guy here. And this guy will move around and go to each new campsite in the main storyline, but he has the only option to, I need to upgrade my gear. Because of that, you need to get here to this point right here to be able to do any of the crafting options available to you. So before we get into the crafting, there's just some kind of housekeeping to do on this. What you're really trying to do is get mods that are available and the resources that you'll need to upgrade your mods from each point. So here you can see I've clicked all the green and all the blue. We're going to unclick green here. And just from all the blue that we have marked, these all have mods on them. And you can see Fusion Blast, Weakening Bullets, sure. Now, when I dismantle these, I'm going to get those mods. Now, of course, I'm not going to go through each one to see which one it is, but that's how it kind of gets done. Now, you might just think, well, I actually want to sell most of my guns for scrap. How do I know which mods I already have so I can kind of look through it? Well, you'll see here that these all look the same. There's no tell. But down here, you can see that little square beside Ground Crush. That means that mod, for me, is already unlocked. And so what you can do, actually, is look through each blue and see which ones have the square and unclick them if you want to use for scrap. I don't generally recommend going for doing a lot of scrap type things. I would say dismantle almost everything until the late game, and then you can start selling for scrap when you need certain resources and you need to buy those resources from the vendors. But in the early game, everything for scrap. Now, additionally, let's say we mark everything here, and you're like, okay, well, what am I going to get? How do I know what I'm going to get here? I know the little tab comes up here, and it says you get this, 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 and that. But that's, it's hard to see all of them, especially because a lot of them are shard based, and I'll talk through shards later. But if you hover over your delete, it'll say everything you're about to get, all the resources, all the shards that you're about to get, and all the mods you're about to get. So that's kind of the general overview of crafting. This is how you develop the beginning part and set up to do all these things. Now, what are you going to need these mods for? Where do they go? What do the shards do? We're going to get into that. But before we do, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, so when I dismantle it, I'll get all these, level 1 mods, as this guy has available to me, right? And what people have been calling it is a mod library. So let's say you go here and you want to go to mod gear and you're like, okay, so I'm going to get some level 1 mods. Not great, but they're tier 1, so it's understandable, right? But I'll never be able to get the tier 2 and tier 3 mods that are much better until way later in the game. It's going to suck. You're going to have to re-get all these tier 2s and tier 3s. Now, they might be able to share your mod library later, but there's a kind of caveat way to do it right now. So if you have a high tier character and you want your lower tier character to have the good mods, you simply put the weapons into the stash and either leave the regular mods on them or mod them out yourself, and you'll be able to transfer mods from one character to another. As you can see here, I have a level 50 weapon, not really important, but I have a level 2 mod, and I modified it, as you can see that little wrench and screwdriver, and I put a tier 3 mod on it. That way, I'm artificially giving 2 mods over here, and Strings of Gauss is what I'm going to be giving over. So obviously, you just take this, and you go, yep, these are now mine, sure. And then I just go to my inventory, and let's get all these new epics that we just got. Go to dismantle, and you can see that I'm getting a bunch of tier 2 and tier 3 mods now. So this is really how you upgrade your characters when you have a really high level character to begin with. And that's the general basic overview of how dismantling works and how you build up a library or resources in the first place. So let's go over a little bit here, and we're just going to go over the base, just the base level stuff. Like, what are you doing all of this for? Like, why is it helpful? What does it do? So let's just kind of go through it. Let's say we have this gun here. This is what I have equipped, and I want to improve its rarity. Why would I improve its rarity? Well, as you can see, I have armor pierce, skills life leech, and nothing else. When I improve its rarity, I'm going to get a mod slot. Okay, so when I have a mod slot, obviously I can modify it to where I want it to be. Maybe this is a really good green, I don't know, and I want to upgrade it to like a rare rarity. Cool, you can do that here by just hitting improve rarity. Pretty expensive for a low level, 229 iron, but for a higher level, much cheaper. From there, you can also improve a blue and improve it to an epic, and you might think, well, why would I want to do that? Well, obviously you're going to get another mod slot again, which is absolutely great. And as you can see with a lot of epics, you're going to have 3 separate attributes. So you're going to roll an attribute slot, because you can see here I only have 2 attribute slots. So you're actually going to roll another attribute slot, which is also very helpful. And so that's kind of what the improved rarity does. Generally, it's not used, but if you have a really good weapon early on and you feel like it can really upgrade you, go right ahead. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. If it helps you through the game, I would recommend it. If you've got good slots for it, perfect. So we're going to quickly go over the improve, or the raise attributes rather. This one is very late game. I would not tell anybody to do this early. This is something that you really should only focus on much later in the game. So you can see it says 36 shards and it says armor pierce. When I hover over my shards, I have 1. It's 4 bonus firepower. I would need 36 armor pierce. And if we look at our dismantled, in there we can see that I don't have any. Oh, I do have armor pierce times 25. It's the 3rd one in. So I wouldn't even have enough if I deleted all those items. I wouldn't even have enough. So this one I would just not get. But this is not something that you want to worry about now, because when you dismantle this weapon, you're not going to be getting a lot of these shards back. It takes a long time to build up these shards, and they're very expensive to level up your gear. So you want to wait until you have the most end game gear that you really, really like to upgrade and raise attributes. Because additionally, from here, we're going to delete these just so I can show you what I'm talking about here. Let's say you've got max health. Okay, so you can see I go from 28 to 30. Not a big upgrade. That is not super helpful. That's not going to be very big for you. And so this attributes is not something you really want to worry about in the early game. This is something that you want to really keep dismantling everything, build up a huge shard vault. You know, as I see, like now I've got less than 100 in each one. You want to build up a huge shard vault so that when you get to the end of the game and you have really good end game gear, you're like, oh, I really like this. Those tiny upgrades are really going to help me. You're going to have a shard vault that you can just spam click your raise attributes, and you're going to have the item that you really, really like. So that's kind of how that goes. Swap variant is one of my favorite things, but it doesn't work on legendaries, which is unfortunate, because my favorite variant, as I'm going to show you here, is always burst fire, or usually called tactical. Now, because this variant isn't available on most legendaries, I end up not being able to put tactical on it because it only works up to epic. Why does it only work up to epic? I don't know. But this is a very easy way to push your character into the direction you want. For instance, when you swap variant here, you can go from lightweight to standard, and you can see the change over to the left, what's happening here. So in the lightweight, I get more clips, more shots per second, and a higher crit multiplier. When I go standard, I have less clips, way more damage, and a lower crit multiplier, and less shots per minute, right? So this can kind of like build out your character. Now, a good example of this is if you have a rifle that has 8 shots in it with no scope, you could turn it into the 1-shot variant. And if you're doing a 1-shot variant Technomancer, that might be really good for you. And so that's just the general overview here. I know I haven't talked about leveling up yet, but we're going to get there, don't worry. So that's just kind of the general overview. Swap variant, you also have to have dismantled something of that variant to be able to unlock it in the first place. As you saw here, I don't have burst fire unlocked because I haven't found a double gun and dismantled it and got burst fire for this character specifically. So now let's just look at level up really quickly. So whenever you level up something, as you can see here, there's a little bit of a bug. When you level up, it kind of re-rolls your armor stats. So I'm actually going to lose armor here. And it says anomaly power ? Anomaly power should generally go up. Those secondary stats will go up when you level up an item. But as you can see here, when you hover over it, you'll see the item change. You should generally not be leveling up your items at this level, right? When you get to much later in the game and you find a gun you really like, I did it for a gun from level 44 to 50. I found a gun I really liked. I thought it was really strong, and I couldn't find a replacement for it, so I kept leveling it up. Generally, when you're increasing world tier levels or challenge tier levels, you're going to find better gear just on your own. So leveling up each piece of gear individually is going to be very tough. Like 126 leather for this character, I have 4 level ups in the bank, and that's pretty much it. So am I really going to level up level 5 piece of gear to level 9? Probably not. You should generally leave level ups to late game content, just like you should leave raise attributes to late game content, especially because they're small variations in damage or health. For modding, getting into this kind of tier library, there's not a lot of options here, but if we were to just kind of left click, you see how it's so cheap, right? Modding is an easy way to increase your abilities. Like right now, let's say this red, by the way, means that that slot is already taken in terms of like that mod is already applied to another piece of gear. So if you apply it again, it will not double up. You already have it. So it's not like you can increase Earthquake's mod level to like 10,000 at level 1. It's not going to work that way. You only get to have it once, and this is pretty much saying you already have it on something. It's not going to reapply. Additionally, there's a small little caveat here where when you overwrite a mod, as you can see, I don't have this one currently. How do I, let's go back. I don't have this mod currently. As you can see, there's no square. If you modify over that piece of gear, you will not get that mod piece. So for instance, what I mean is if I want Panzer Drain and I do this and use Ground Crush and override it, I do not get Panzer Drain while I override it. I have to dismantle the item to get the mod. And that's very important to know because there's a lot of legendary gear where you might want to overwrite the tier 3 gear, but you should not overwrite the tier 3 gear because it's first off very hard to get, and you're going to need to dismantle it to be able to get that tier 3 unless you have it already and you can do the stash switch. So now we're going to go a little bit deeper in this, and we've talked about the general basics, and now we're going to talk about how to really mod out your gear. So you're at the end of the game. All right, you've assumedly dismantled a large amount of things. You are able to mod a lot of things. Now it's time to start really thinking, where do you want to go with your build, right? As you can see, like what I mean by late game differences is that you can see all my resources here. I have a massive amount of resources. I do not worry about swapping variants, you know, like, oh no, 200 iron. I have 83,000 iron. Like I'm not worried, right? My shard bank, we're looking over 2,000 on each one. Cooldown reduction, the shard bank is low because I'll show you here, spammed up a little bit of my Raise Attributes. As I said, you wait till late game. I've got a level 50 legendary piece of gear that I really, really like. So I've kept it. And I just went, you know what? I'm not getting rid of this. It has everything I want on it. Boom. I'm raising every attribute to max. And as you can see, 150 shards is quite expensive. So let's kind of talk about what your real goal is here, right, in the end game. Like I said before, raising attributes is obviously the #1 goal. Having level 50 gear is also very good. You know, we talked about when to level up, when not to. But the real thing to do is talking about modding gear. Now, you can only mod one slot. As you can see, this one's locked, and you can see this one is the one I modded. What this means is that I can't mod both pieces. I can't get a piece of gear that has the 3 things I really want and then mod the gear. That's not how it works. You can only mod one slot. So every piece of gear that you get, if you're thinking it's going to be an upgrade, it has to already have a mod on it that you really, really want. In this sense, I got Blighted Rounds effective for 1 additional magazine. Pretty good. So I decided I'll put Radical Therapy on it, put 15% more damage on Toxic. So that's kind of how you have to know. You have to know which mods you already want on your pieces of gear. For instance, going to here, going to weapons, this is a very important one. I know I want Winter Blast. Critical shots, good Icy Blast, increases freeze, blah, blah, blah. But I also know that I can't actually switch my weapon unless it gives me a lot of health back. So as you can see, I have Killer Medic here, which is great. You know, getting killing shots gives me 6,500 health. I would prefer Stigma on there, and that would make it perfect for me. And I believe this is Stigma somewhere here. But what Stigma pretty much does is gives me 30% of health based on a critical shot. And I know it's a tier 2 mod. And how many of them look the same? Too many? Here it is. Oh, Striga. So 30% of critical damage returned to you as health. I do a lot of critical shots. They do 50,000 damage each. 30% of 50,000. I'm getting 15,000 HP every crit and 0.1 second cooldown. Obviously, this is better than Killer Medic, right? So if I were able to have this on the Killer Medic slot, I would, but I can only choose one. So I have to decide what's more important. What role does the item that I have fill, and what mod piece does it have? And that's very important. You might have a perfect piece of gear, but it has bad mods. You can't fix 2 bad mods, right? So sometimes you have to accept that, okay, it's a perfect piece of gear, has 1 okay mod, and I can make the second mod very good. So is it worth it? Yes, no, maybe. It really depends. But here I found it was worth it because 95.1k firepower is not something you come around very often. As you can see, it even surpasses both the legendaries in my inventory, and the most I've ever found past that is 92k. So for me, I know that I have to make, you know, a concession and go, all right, Killer Medic's not great. It's a tier 1 mod. I don't really enjoy it, but I don't really have a choice, so I have to take it. And this is why legendary gear is so good, because when you see here, I'm looking at something that starts with a tier 3 mod. So when I go to tier 3 and I go, sure, I want Claymore Torrent, I've got 2 tier 3 mods on this piece of gear, right? And I'm going to actually just lock this in just because it doesn't really matter. But imagine that you're doing this, right? You mod the slot, the other one gets locked. You're locked on 2 tier 3 mods. That's why legendary gear is so good. They start with a tier 3 mod every single time. Epics can only start with a tier 2 mod. So it makes it really, really tough to not have the best gear in the game unless you're stacked out with legendaries, because you're forcing 2 tier 3 mods to happen on it. And that's the real difference there. And that's what you should really be thinking about when you're trying to mod gear and whether or not a gear piece is good enough. Mods make a huge difference on your build path and how good your build is. So you really have to think like, okay, this gear is perfect, but do the mods fit? 8,000 bonus firepower is great, right? I'm not saying it's not, but as you can see, crit stack gives me 8,000 firepower stacking up to 5 times. That's clearly better, right? So if this would have came with a mod that overpowers the 3 attributes, then I have to make a decision like, where do I want to go with this piece of gear? And that's what it really comes down to. Just kind of keep in your mind, what's your build? Where are you going? And that's how modding really gets interesting, because you don't get to choose what comes on the gear. You just get it and you have to work with it. And mods are always more important than whatever the base stats are. But in the case of this, you make some judgments. Can I live with just Killer Medic? And the answer is yes, because I can still mod it out to be very good for what I need. So that's my total breakdown. That's everything that you should need to know about modding and crafting and the general gist of it. If I had to give some big points of what you should be doing, dismantle everything. Unless you're level 50, dismantle everything. Scrap is not needed. You will very rarely need scrap. You will always need resources. You will always need shards. You will always need mods. So just scrap everything that you're not using, okay? Level up items only in the end game. Raise attributes only in the end game. Improve rarity at your own discretion. No real difference there. Swap variants all the time. Mod gear all the time. Those upgrades are cheap and they're amazing and they can change your whole game style. Whereas raise attributes and level up, going to be less useful for sure. So thank you so much for watching, guys. If you have any other ideas on what I should have talked about here, please leave it in the comments and I'll be sure to discuss it, because, the game's only been out a week. Anybody who tells you they know everything is lying to you. So let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you guys later. And if you liked the video, please leave it a like and have a great day.